The slap echoed, tearing through the luxurious air of the business-class cabin on flight MA001 from London to New York. In that moment, every gaze in the cabin seemed to freeze, and the harsh sound hung suspended in the air, reluctant to fade away. A thin streak of blood traced across the lower lip of the woman seated in 1A. A calm, composed black woman. She did not respond in the way one might expect after such a public insult. No shouting, no standing up to protest, no accusations or bitterness. Instead, she gently touched her lip, wiping away the blood with a neatly manicured fingertip, then quietly fastened a platinum wing-shaped lapel pin. A subtle tiny detail unnoticed by anyone in the cabin, except the very person who had just struck her. Heather Collins, a 35-year-old flight attendant, breathing heavily from anger, not yet fully aware of whom she had just hit. "You have no right to speak to me like that," Heather snapped, her voice filled with a mix of triumph and judgment. "You know, people like you need to learn your place." Her words fell heavily like lead among the passengers, who silently pulled out their phones. Perhaps they dared not intervene, yet they could no longer ignore it. Everything was being recorded. The cabin light, the blood on the lip, and the terrifying calm of the woman who remained seated. What Heather didn't know was that this woman, Dr. Celeste Morgan, was not just a passenger on the flight, but the creator of it. From the seat designs to the shock absorption technology in the cabin, everything bore her mark. She did not just hold a business-class ticket. She owned the plane, the airline, and the entire aerospace ecosystem Heather depended on for her livelihood. Celeste glanced at her custom-made PC Philippe watch, engraved with the words, CEO, Morgan Aerospace. A faint smile played on her lips, devoid of anger, but a quiet symbol of power. It was the smile of a true predator toward those who mistakenly believed they held the upper hand. She did not need to shout for justice, nor flash a business card or call a manager. She only needed to wait. Because she knew, in just 35 more minutes, Heather's small world would completely collapse. Above 30,000 feet, Flight MA001 silently soared toward the Atlantic horizon. While the business-class cabin was thick with tension, Celeste Morgan remained unshaken. She sat upright, her gaze drifting lightly across the window as if observing the layers of clouds rather than the eyes discreetly watching her every move. Perhaps no one noticed, but in that moment, Celeste was conducting a test. Not a safety check, nor a service evaluation, but a test of humanity, kindness, fairness, and awareness within the very system she had spent half her life building. Today's flight was no coincidence. Seat 1A, the very seat Heather Collins had just questioned, was the one Celeste personally designed 3 years ago, when Morgan Aerospace signed a contract to upgrade the business-class cabin for the partner airline Sky Nova. That seat was more than a symbol of premium comfort. It embodied an ideal that everyone, regardless of background, if equipped with competence and determination, deserves the best seat E without needing anyone's permission. Yet, with just a look and tone from a flight attendant in the sky, all those values seemed to be denied. Heather, dressed in a perfectly pressed uniform and wearing the smile meant for every passenger, became a symbol of something old and dangerous, hidden prejudice. She didn't ask Celeste's name, didn't check the booking information, didn't verify the system. She simply looked and decided, people like you don't belong here. And that was exactly what Celeste needed to see. Seats 2B, 3C, and 1C, where directors, lawyers, and investors sat, quietly raised their phones to record. No words were spoken, but their eyes began to realize something was wrong. Celeste understood well. Discrimination never appears in financial reports. It's not printed on revenue charts, nor revealed in growth graphs. It hides in glances, in tones of voice, in how a staff member decides who deserves service and who doesn't. Celeste didn't need to prove who she was. The platinum lapel pin, the CEO engraved watch, and the $12,000 round trip ticket said enough. But today she wanted something else. The truth. The raw truth, unmasked by spotlight or glamorous titles. She wanted to see the real faces of those who serve under the guise of professionalism. And now she had seen it. When Heather approached again with her arrogant face and growing tone, Celeste did not react. She gently opened the leather briefcase at her feet and took out a document stamped Top Secret Internal. The first page bore bold letters, Morgan Aerospace, Internal Field Assessment, Sky Nova Airlines, Flight MA001. Person in charge, Dr. Celeste Morgan. When Heather returned with an even more determined look, she didn't realize the tide was turning. Celeste remained unnervingly calm, which Heather took as a challenge. She crossed her arms and stood right in front of Celeste, her voice full of threat. I will count to 10. If you don't leave your seat, I will call security. Silence enveloped the business class cabin like a thick glass wall, everyone holding their breath. A few phones still quietly recorded, red recording lights blinking like the heartbeat of approaching truth. Celeste didn't respond. She simply placed the folder in front of her face down, concealing the stamped label. Then she glanced at her wristwatch, a special design gifted when Morgan Aerospace reached $2 billion in revenue last year. The second hand kept moving steadily. 1, Heather began counting. 2, her voice grew louder. Apologies to the legitimate business class passengers for this inconvenience, Heather said, deliberately loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. 3, a message arrived on Celeste's phone. Confirmation of receiving the order. A brief, expressionless line, but enough to mark the beginning of the storm. 4, Heather continued with her cynical prejudice. The biggest problem in this society is people who think they deserve things they never earned. Celeste said nothing, gently flipping the folder open to reveal a page signed by her own hand. The decision to purchase a $843 million new fleet for Sky Nova Airlines, the very airline operating flight MA001. 5. Celeste touched the badge on her lapel, the Morgan Aerospace emblem shining brightly under the cabin lights. 6, from the service area, the flight manager, Chief Flight Attendant Raymond Walker, stepped out. He looked briefly startled but maintained a neutral tone. Heather, what is going on? This woman refuses to comply with crew instructions, Heather replied sharply. She doesn't have the right to sit here. Raymond glanced at Celeste, then bent to check her boarding pass. His expression changed momentarily. Ma'am, this is your correct seat, and you are indeed an executive class passenger. 7. Heather couldn't hold back, her voice rising. They always lie, always play the race card, always turn everything into a discrimination issue. Her words sparked like a flame hitting a powder keg. The air in the cabin seemed to freeze. 8. Heather grabbed the radio and called, requesting immediate intervention from security. 9. Celeste looked up, her gaze eerily calm. 10. Heather raised her hand, and for the second time, that hand swung down. The sharp slap echoed like a drum beat, signaling an uprising. Blood dripped again from Celeste's lip down her white shirt collar, spreading over the finely tailored grey vest from Milan. But this time, there was no silence. No more shock. Instead, rapid movement erupted from seat 1B, where a tall man in a black suit stepped forward, the gleaming badge on his belt proclaiming him U.S. Federal Air Marshal Logan Reyes. Logan Reyes, a 38-year-old federal air marshal, walked toward seat 1A with an expressionless face. Standing over 6 feet tall, with a strong build and sharp eyes, he immediately silenced the business-class cabin. Heather turned around, as if just rescued, her voice full of relief. "Finally, you're here. This woman has been causing trouble throughout the flight. She refuses to move and just assaulted me." "I'm not talking to you," Logan interrupted sharply, like a blade cutting through the lies spreading around. "I'm addressing the passenger." He turned to Celeste. "Ma'am, do you need medical assistance?" That question struck Heather like an invisible punch. She froze, eyes wide, mouth agape, as if she had never imagined a scenario where she would be the one under suspicion. Logan continued, his voice low but firm. "I see a passenger bleeding and a crew member standing above her with a clenched fist. In my opinion, this constitutes grounds to suspect a serious physical assault, a federal offense." From the back row, the sound of shattering glass echoed. A champagne glass held by Robert Lansing, an investment fund executive seated in 2B, fell to the floor. "Oh my God," he whispered. Others began murmuring, fingers tapping quickly on their phone screens. On social media, a video capturing the incident started going viral. The hashtag passenger slap ignited like a spark setting fire to a dry forest of public outrage. "You don't understand." Heather began to lose control, her voice trembling. She's trying to play the victim. It's a setup. They always do this. They produce fake documents, then film videos to profit from lawsuits. They exploit sympathy. They weaponize race. No one responded. The silence now was no longer passive. It was judgment. "I have never mentioned my race," Celeste said, speaking for the first time since the slap. "You jumped to that conclusion yourself." Logan didn't wait any longer. He stepped forward, pulled handcuffs from his belt, and spoke with a voice as hard as steel. "Heather Collins, you are under arrest for assaulting a passenger on a commercial flight. A federal crime." As the cuffs closed around Heather's wrists, her final protest shattered into panic. "You'll regret this. I have labor protection. I have a union. I will sue you back." Celeste said nothing, but her eyes, quiet, sharp like a knife in the stillness, said it all. The game had just begun, and this time, every piece had been turned over. Heather Collins was handcuffed right in the middle of the business-class cabin, where just minutes before, she thought she held full control. But that control was now a shattered illusion, and she was beginning to feel it as the gazes around the cabin shifted from avoidance to clear condemnation. The first to stand was Robert Lansing. He turned to Logan with a low but firm voice. "I witnessed the entire incident from the start. The passenger presented valid documents, never raised her voice or provoked anyone. It was the new flight attendant who repeatedly threatened and insulted her." Next was Linda Wu, International Marketing Director of a major tech corporation, seated at 3C. She said little, simply raised her phone, the screen replaying the video just recorded, and nodded at Air Marshal Logan. "I have full video evidence from the beginning up to the moment the cuffs were secured," Linda said, each word ringing like a hammer striking Heather's career coffin. "The clip is already spreading online," Linda added, eyes fixed on the screen. "The hashtag is trending at the top in both the US and the UK." This was no longer just an incident on a plane. It had become a global hot topic, and every action, even the smallest word, had been recorded and spread exponentially. Heather, now just a name, struggled in despair, as if frenzied words could wash away her actions. "This is a setup! You're being fooled by the media!" she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. "People like her always know how to manipulate. She's nobody. She has no right." At that moment, Celeste calmly opened her briefcase. No rush, no intimidation, just casually flipping it open, like lifting the lid of a morning teapot. Then she placed a small tray with a connected phone in front of her. A male voice on the other end spoke clearly and confidently. "Hello, Dr. Morgan. The legal and press teams at Morgan Aerospace are standing by for your instructions." The entire cabin fell into absolute silence. The name Dr. Morgan echoed, along with the confirmation from the other end, like a lightning strike splitting the ground. Robert Lansing put his hand on his forehead. Linda Wu held her breath. Logan stepped back slightly. And Heather, mid-protest, finally froze when her eyes caught the platinum logo on Celeste's jacket. That emblem, the gleaming wings, was no mere decoration. It was the brand symbol appearing in every major federal aviation contract for the past 10 years. And now everyone understood. The woman who had been humiliated, assaulted, and doubted was the one holding the power to fire the entire airline with just a signature. Once the name Celeste Morgan was nothing more than a notation in the corner of a technical blueprint, unnoticed, forgotten. But the moment the voice on the other end confirmed Dr. Morgan, that name reverberated like a shockwave, shaking the entire business-class cabin. Heather stood frozen, her face pale, as if all the blood had drained from her body. The excuses poised to spill from her lips turned into silence. Celeste remained silent. Instead, she gently opened a grey leather briefcase, pulling out a folder marked "Top Secret, Internal," and methodically laid out pieces of evidence on the table. A photo of the aircraft cabin's structural design, with Dr. Celeste Morgan's bold signature in the lower right corner. A snapshot of her standing in a research lab, behind her a three-dimensional aerodynamic model of the CM-1X automatic pressurization system, a proprietary technology now used across Sky Nova's entire fleet. And finally, a photo of her shaking hands with the executive board of Europe's top aircraft engine manufacturer, a smile shared among the architects of the future. "You asked how I could sit in seat 1A, Celeste spoke, calm but with each word sinking deeply into the air. "I'm not just sitting here. I designed this seat. I created the system that keeps this plane from falling through turbulence. I signed the $847 million contract that keeps this fleet flying. And I approve the monthly payroll of over 2,000 employees you think you stand above. She paused, her gaze not angry, but penetrating, as if seeing into something long decayed within Heather. I didn't buy a business class ticket. I built the entire business class system. I'm not finding my way in. I'm the one who put up the door you're trying to shut on me. Air Marshal Logan, who had maintained strict neutrality, lowered his eyes. He knew this case went far beyond a simple assault. It was an attack on the very soul of commercial aviation, exposed by a woman with the power to change it at its core. Outside the window, New York City gradually appeared below, the lights of JFK Airport streaming like shimmering rivers from all directions. On the runway, a convoy of sleek black SUVs was lined up. Nearby, reporters raised microphones, and beyond them stood Morgan Aerospace's legal team in silver-gray uniforms, lined up like a protective guard. Above, less than 10 minutes from landing, Dr. Celeste Morgan slowly closed her leather briefcase. Her face betrayed no joy, no thirst for revenge. Only a simmering determination, like a nuclear reactor beginning to power up, waiting for the moment to unleash energy that will burn away all remaining rotten structures. The airplane door swung open with a heavy sound, echoing through the VIP lounge like a death knell for those standing on the wrong side of the moral line. FBI agent Simone Torres, a stern-faced Latina woman with eyes as cold as steel, was the first to enter. Behind her came Morgan Aerospace's legal team, 3 federal investigators, a forensic photographer, and 2 senior media representatives. The scene resembled a meticulously staged trial, except the defendant was the trembling woman in the airline uniform, handcuffed, her sunken eyes no longer reflecting reality. Dr. Morgan, Agent Torres spoke evenly and firmly. Do you require medical attention? Celeste Morgan silently touched the dried blood on her lip and nodded gently. The assault has been recorded on 6 different devices with multiple witnesses. I believe that is sufficient. Torres nodded, then turned to Heather Collins, who still clung to the last remnants of her delusions. Agent Torres, you must hear me out. This is a misunderstanding. She caused trouble. I was only doing my job. Heather's voice faltered amid the heavy footsteps of the team entering the cabin. You are Heather Elaine Collins, 35 years old. You have worked for Skynova Airlines for 5 years. Agent Torres read from the documents in her hand, each detail piercing the fragile foundation Heather still stood on. 3 complaints of discrimination, $21,000 paid out to settle those cases. And now, you are the suspect in a federal investigation for criminal conduct motivated by racial discrimination. Heather's face turned pale. How do you know about that? Those records are confidential. There is no such thing as confidential when it involves a federal crime, Torres replied, never taking her eyes off her, and especially not when the victim is a senior defense contractor managing over $2 billion in government contracts. Heather heard nothing else. Her world exploded. Every safety net, from labor contracts to union protections, was burned away by the stark reality. She had struck a blow against a power symbol she never recognized. At that moment, Celeste Morgan, turned to Agent Torres. "I want to hold a press conference within the next 3 hours at the Morgan Aerospace headquarters in Manhattan, and I want my legal team to prepare a civil lawsuit for damages totaling $23 million. Heather let out a sob. That number felt like a noose tightening around her already decayed career. "One more thing," Celeste said, her voice cold as ice and snow. "I want Sky Nova Airlines and their entire executive board to attend the meeting. If they do not come, I will consider terminating all fleet leasing contracts." Each word fell like a death sentence. Heather, once believing herself the gatekeeper, was now just a remnant. Beyond the airport doors, the press waited. And high above, in the realm of power, a seismic shock was beginning to shake the entire American aviation industry. On the 54th floor of the glass headquarters of Sky Nova Airlines in Midtown Manhattan, 12 faces sat around a 10-meter-long walnut conference table, their eyes tense as if awaiting the final verdict. On the screen, hanging in the center of the room, the image of Dr. Celeste Morgan appeared in a black suit, the white strip on her lower lip still stained faintly with blood. Her gaze didn't need to be loud, but it was enough to make everyone sit up straight. "We will not waste time on empty formalities," Celeste began, her voice low, clear, not loud, but carrying more weight than any financial statement ever presented in this room. "I'll be frank, you have failed, not only in personnel management, but in ethical responsibility, legal awareness, and in building an organization capable of enduring in a rapidly changing world." Robert Leland, the chairman of the board, a man in his 60s with slicked back silver hair and a voice that had cost many CEOs their jobs, tried to regain control. "Dr. Morgan, we sincerely apologize for the unfortunate incident, but it was an individual's behavior. We cannot blame the entire system." "Robert," Celeste cut him off, her eyes colder than the LED lights in the conference room. "You received complaints about Heather Collins in 2021, again in 2022, and a third time earlier this year. 3 complaints, 3 quiet financial settlements, not a single internal disciplinary action. You didn't just know, you chose to ignore it." She held up 3 folders, each containing internal reports signed by Robert himself. The entire conference room fell into a heavy silence. "CEO Michael Pierce," Celeste swiveled the screen slightly toward the left side of the table. "You are no exception. According to the records, you approved the decision to keep Heather on, citing, 'It's not wise to make a fuss during the IPO preparation phase.'" Michael's face turned pale. No one pretended to take notes anymore. All eyes now waited, not to argue, but to see what worse was yet to come. Celeste slowly placed 2 more documents on the table. "I will simplify things for you. Here are 2 choices. First, you will undertake a full reorganization within 30 days, from leadership to recruitment, training, and internal feedback policies. I want a new CEO. Someone who understands the value of diversity and fairness. I want a $100 million compensation fund for victims of discrimination. And I want every employee, from CEO to flight attendant, to participate in mandatory anti-bias training. Each of you here will be required to contribute personal assets to the community fund." "And the second option?" Robert's voice hoarse. "The second option," Celeste said calmly, "is that I will send all these records to the United States Department of Justice along with a press release. Sky Nova will face charges of complicity in civil rights violations. You may keep your positions for a few more weeks, but stock prices will plummet, partners will withdraw capital, and nearly $1 billion government contract will be terminated. Most importantly, I will cancel all Morgan Aerospace fleet leasing contracts with immediate effect. Michael's hands trembled. Robert dared not breathe deeply. A female legal director quietly slid her chair back, instinctively sensing the walls closing in. Because they all understood, this was not a negotiation. This was an execution. No one in the room spoke a word. Only the ticking of the second hand on the wall clock remained, each slow beat counting down the remaining time of a decayed system. Robert Leland, his face pale, was the first to speak. Not to argue, but to surrender. I agree to option 1, he said, his voice trembling. I will resign from the board and personally donate $5 million to the fund. Celeste didn't blink. And the others? A series of nods followed instinctively. Those who once sat at the pinnacle of power were now mere shadows in the brightly lit room. Michael Pierce reluctantly signed his resignation letter, his hand shaking so much he had to place it twice before getting it right. COO Linda Whitaker removed her wedding ring, took off the personal name tag pinned to her collar, as if dissolving herself before being publicly named. No one retained pride. No one had a place when the truth was illuminated. The meeting ended with a single statement from Celeste. Within 48 hours, Sky Nova will announce a comprehensive restructuring plan. If you fail to fulfill every commitment, I will not only withdraw the contract, but also make you the symbol of failure for a generation of irresponsible leaders. And I promise, no one will save you from the media and legal consequences. Leaving the meeting, Celeste did not return to her office. She walked straight into an emergency command room where her team was waiting. 12 screens clearly showing online connections with the largest airlines in the US. Delta, American Airlines, United, Alaska, JetBlue, Southwest, Frontier, Spirit, all logged in. Emergency meeting. Start now, Celeste said, without greeting or ceremony. Sky Nova's incident is not isolated. It is a symptom. And if you don't want to be the next victim, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. 12 faces awaited. And Celeste, the woman who single-handedly toppled the entire Sky Nova board, was ready to issue her next ultimatum. But this time, not to protect herself, rather to make an entire industry look honestly at itself. 12 CEOs, representing nearly 80% of the US airline market share, sat upright before the screen. Some maintained a defensive posture, others hid behind diplomatic language, yet all understood this meeting was unlike any industry conference before. No agenda, no moderator, only one voice, the voice of Dr. Celeste Morgan, the woman who turned a slap into a nationwide reform. The case of Heather Collins is no coincidence, Celeste began, flipping open a dossier. It is the direct consequence of an operational system all too accustomed to turning a blind eye. From training flight attendants without multicultural awareness programs, to hiring policies that conceal bias beneath a veneer of neutrality, to an internal culture that encourages silence instead of action. She paused briefly, her gaze sweeping over the faces across the screen, those who had repeatedly refused to cooperate with Morgan Aerospace's proposals for automated behavior monitoring systems. And now, you have no choice. She tapped lightly on the keyboard. A secondary screen displayed the terms Morgan Aerospace was set to impose on all industry partners. 1. Establish real, time behavior monitoring systems on all flights to detect and immediately intervene in signs of discrimination or offensive conduct. 2. Mandatory periodic training for all staff, from pilots and flight attendants to executives, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. 3. Conduct independent and public investigations for any complaints related to racial, gender, or religious bias. 4. Enforce strict financial penalties on airlines that fail to meet standards, including possible termination of contracts for technical services, fleets, and maintenance. A Western U.S. airline executive muttered, "These terms are too harsh. We need time to discuss with our legal team." Celeste showed no impatience. Her voice was colder than steel. "I will give you time. 60 days. If by then you have not announced a full compliance roadmap, I will publicly list the airlines that refuse to participate, and I believe the public will make wise consumer decisions." No threats, no shouting. Because everyone in that virtual room understood. One hashtag, one news headline, one accidental share could cost an airline hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue within hours. Celeste looked directly into the camera, each final word stamped like a new declaration for the airline industry. "I am not asking you to change for me. I am asking you to change for the millions of passengers who have been silent too long, and from today will no longer be silent." 60 days after the final meeting, the U.S. airline industry entered an unprecedented phase of transformation. From major carriers like Delta and United to regional names like Horizon Air, all announced reform roadmaps adhering to the Morgan standards. Internal newsletters featured dedicated sections on fair service attitudes for the first time. Bias training became mandatory, just like safety checks. And on every flight, passengers could feel the change, not through words, but through the way they were seen, greeted, and respected. What about Heather Collins? She is serving an 8-year sentence in a federal prison, not because of a slap, but because of the deceptive systems she once was a part of. She still claims she was just doing her job, but no one listens anymore. Not because she lost her voice, but because society no longer accepts the voices of those who hide prejudice behind professionalism. At a packed auditorium of the International Aviation Conference, Celeste Morgan, now a global icon of corporate justice, stepped onto the stage. On her chest, the small scar on her lower lip was left uncovered by makeup. It stood there as a silent emblem of the revolution that began the moment she was wronged. "We don't change the world with anger," Celeste said, "but with perseverance, by turning every seemingly small action into a voice that can't be ignored. A slap that once symbolized humiliation is today the beginning of rebirth." In the audience, no one stood out of politeness. They stood because they knew that for the first time in aviation history, and perhaps in the entire service industry, kindness was protected by law, by technology, and by the courage of one person who dared not to stay silent. And from that moment on, people began to believe that as long as one person dares to stand up, the whole system can no longer keep bowing its head. A system doesn't change because of anger. It only changes when someone dares to say, "Enough." Celeste Morgan's story reminds us that a single right action, at the right time and by the right person, can make an entire industry take a hard look at itself. If you believe justice begins with refusing to stay silent, please like this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss stories that make those in power reflect on themselves. And leave a comment with the phrase, "No more silence," because change always starts with a voice.